Good evening and welcome to another edition of Life is People. Well, it's a great honour tonight to be joined by Rex Simonson, which if people been following my social media will notice that with the Ceiling Demons are doing a gig in the Green Room in Stockton. So before we go any further, maybe you two want to speak upon that and how did that come around for you two?
It's supposedly a launch for the single on Butterfly Effect. And we've never actually played a live gig before.
Wow, so this is going to be your very first live experience.
Well, mine, not his, certainly. But yeah, there's a bit of disparity in experience, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm being paid in experience, I'm being told.
Okay. So I think the first questions to really want to delve into is obviously Simon, you got a whole different story which we just briefly mentioned before we went live, but for you, Rex, where did this whole journey for you start?
Well, I think like many people, it was one of the things that came out of the first lockdown. So we bought an eight-track recorder just for fun to mess around, and Dad was actually working with another group called Paranoid London, who were like a two-piece DJ group whose Dad's done a single with before. And they sort of messaged us at the beginning of, I think it was March maybe, saying, we have this song, would you like to work with us? And from there we did a song with them, but from that we thought, well, you know, if we're doing it for somebody else, why don't we just do it for us? And it started out really just as rehearsing, playing along. We thought it's half decent, so we recorded some of it, and we've just not stopped recording since, and somebody's listening apparently.
So let's break this down then. So from a creative point of view, what comes first, the music and then the lyrics, or the lyrics and then the music?
No, that way, music then lyrics.
The lyrics usually come in the 11th hour, about 5 minutes before we finish recording. So.
Okay, so when you're writing lyrics, do you write it literally to the sound you've already got there, or have you got an idea in your head and it's kind of like basically sort of trying to shape it to the music?
A little bit of both, but more kind of with the music that's there in front of you in the last kind of half hour of recording.
Okay.
It's a very last minute thing.
Very, very. I can't put enough emphasis on last minute.
Well, I've always thought some of the best music ever been created has been done in the last minute. I mean, I was one of my favourite albums is Highway 61 by Dylan, and so many songs on that, they were literally, if you go back and listen to some of the you can find them online and stuff, and it is literally just they're going and going and going, and it's just in the moment, and there's some of there's bum notes here and there, and I just think sometimes there's a I don't know, there's almost like an urge for perfection. I don't think that the musical, the things that hit your soul are found in perfection.
We don't suffer from being too precious.
Exactly. Well, just sort of deep, a double question to you, Simon. So what Rex has just explained about how it's done, the way he sort of creative process, was that the same for you right back from the days when you were doing a certain ratio? Has that always been your process?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was we'd just rehearse stuff around and then kind of piece it together. And oftentimes with the early stuff, it would come together on the day of the recording. There wasn't any. It wasn't distilled to a fine degree. It was how it happened and a lot of spontaneity.
Yeah, and I think that's something. I think me and you, Simon, are probably in the same sort of rough generation, and it's like this. This working alongside the Demons and other bands. It's at times I say to them how much music has changed, how much the recording process, everything has sort of changed from, like I say, when we were sort of recording music or making music or listening to music to what it is now. On that one, to you particularly, Simon, and I'll come back to you in a Rex to see your perspective, but what do you think has been the biggest change since you started off a certain ratio to where we are now?
I suppose a lot of the help that you got that you didn't used to get technically, kind of with the advantages of computer stuff. So, quantizing beats to get them in time, tuning vocals to make them in tune, and looping stuff so you didn't have to do, 6 minutes of tambourine on your own in a studio. More, I don't know, it's just, there are a lot more kind of aids to musicians now to make them sound better. We had to do things the old way onto a 2-inch tape. Real recordings in real time with no auto-tune, no quantizing. You had to do it right, or as well as you could.
Yeah, and I've always reflected, I think one of the biggest differences maybe between now, say the 80s and the 90s compared to now, was it was all about, a lot of it was building up an organic fan base and building up from club to pub, and you built yourself up, whereas now people can just put their stuff on Spotify and all they're trying to do is get 10,000 hits or something. That's a big difference.
Yeah, I was thinking more about the music than the kind of the product and how it's received, but yeah, that's very much the case, isn't it, that some people maybe don't even play, they produce music and put it out for people to see on the internet, and then it's almost a virtual experience where they never actually go to a gig, or they never see anyone play a real instrument, or that has changed massively.
Well, that kind of, again, that kind of goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of this, Rex. I mean, you sort of said you started exploring this new journey, started through lockdown, and as further as we go into the future, I think we're going to look back at lockdown as a very strange time in all our lives, really, because, especially from someone like yourself, Rex, who's a creative person. I mean, how did you find that? I mean, did you find that as it helps you to flourish and grow, or did you find it quite stifling?
A bit of both. I think creatively it was good in terms of, just the sheer amount of time we had to do nothing else. I mean, I think playing football and drinking and eating only is for about a month, and then you sort of think, shit, what do I do now? And I think music was a good thing, because after a while you can get quite depressed from doing menial things like, I mean, you can only watch the same TV program so many times without feeling a bit shit, can't you? So I think it was sort of a nice alternative rather than, I've been on my phone for 3 hours today, what am I going to do now? Well, I'll play guitar instead. It's a bit of a creative. It wakes your mind up a bit as well. You don't feel like you're wasting your time as much. And that was a big thing for me, because I've always got to keep going and be occupied with something. I can't really sit still. And then playing, and music was obviously a good thing to channel that into.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the common things I've found talking to a few musicians since COVID has been, it was a moment when the whole world, for whatever reason, I'm not going to get into that discussion, but the world was forced almost to stop and contemplate and see nature and see the things around them, rather than just the busy 9 to 5 we're going on. And I think in some ways it was a great thing for creative people. I know it's sort of like an unpopular thing to say, but I think like you just reflected on this, I think it was a time when I think a lot of people didn't understand, I found it hard to comprehend about, the moments that I think most creative people go through when they're just sitting around for hours and hours and hours and just waiting for inspiration. It kind of hit everybody. It was like, wow, you're stuck in that moment. And it was a very, like I say, it will, as we go further into the future, I think we'll look back at it and think equally, I think there'll be a lot of good things will come out of this. I think there's, they say every hardship, new things will rise, and that's how I personally feel, and that's why I was really excited to connect with you, because I'm really looking forward to the gig we've got coming up in Stockton. And again, I just loved your demo as well. So on your demo one, I mean, you mentioned how you sort of you created it and stuff like that. My kind of next step would be, is there any sort of plan to take that into the future? I mean, are you sort of planning on an LP, an EP? I mean, where's your next step?
That's a good question. We don't really know at the moment. Rex starts university in September, so that might kind of slow it down a bit. But I suppose we can keep doing more recordings, maybe remotely from each other.
Yeah.
And the other guy who plays with us, who is another Simon, has recording, and I can go and see him, so we can piece stuff together and work on it that way.
Yeah, keep doing more of what we're doing, I suppose, in that, like, all we really can do as musicians is just create music, and from there it's sort of out of our hands in a sense, whether it comes to gigs or things like that. That's sort of, I imagine that's up to Stephen Gill and the other people behind him.
Yeah, and I think it kind of that sort of shines in really with the sort of theme what we've been talking about. I mean, one of the great things, because it's never good to look back and hark back to olden times and think, oh, they were great. But I think one of the great things now is that you can work remotely. I mean, I'm sure Simon, you'll probably relate to this. Back in the day, it was if you were starting up a band, say like in Yorkshire or Manchester, or there was a big urge to get you down to London, and it, like from London you had to go across to America. Whereas now you can, like you say, remotely work, which is a great part of where we live in this time of of human civilization. You have the ability to work remotely rather than just being fixed to a place and all your band members have got to follow you around.
Yeah, it's opened doors in other ways, but like I say, that can be too much of its own thing where people don't actually go and play gigs or don't actually travel. So I think there's a balance to be had there.
100%. I mean, I going back to what I said earlier on, I still think there's you can't change the wheel, you can't change how things are going. I still think there's a big thing. I always say to most bands I speak to, go out and play live, meet the people, don't do it all online, because there's something very I'm sure Simon, you probably know this more than anyone in this conversation, that some of your greatest memories have been in front of a live audience rather than sat in a studio for 4 or 5 days just all arguing over a bass line.
Yeah, absolutely. The thrill of playing in front of people who are actually interested in your music is something else. That's why people are still going, when they're in their 60s, 70s and onwards, and I don't think it's to do with money. I think it's they don't know what to do and they can't live without that. They need people to come and see them, and they need to perform.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and I know sort of, from my understanding, you're based around Richmond, aren't you? That's where you're based at all, completely. So do you find the actual surroundings of Richmond, I mean, I talk about this because it's something obviously working alongside the Demons, that they find a great inspiration in just the nature and the beauty that is North Yorkshire. I mean, is that something that inspires you as a writer or as a musician?
I would say so, yeah, definitely. To live in Swaledale, or the opening to Swaledale, is an incredible experience. And through the seasons, yeah, it's another thing. It's a part of your life. You live in there. Your life is within that setting, and it takes a bit to get into it because we didn't move until June in 20. But having been exposed to, a very harsh winter and a lot of snow and springtime, it is really nice. We're very lucky. We're very lucky.
Well,
I think it's also been somewhat inspiring in that for me as. Oh, sorry. I was going to say that for me, as inspiring a different way in that it's sort of been a channel for me because I'm thinking music, it'd be nice to move forward to somewhere else. So, I'm at that age now where I'm really keen to move forward and get onto other places. So I've always got, an industrial sense in my mind and get moving to places in cities like Manchester, if that makes sense.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think that's one of the beauties about being a creative soul at heart is we can find inspiration. We can find inspiration not only in the countryside, but again, people say, why the cities? It's not so much. I don't know. I'll speak for myself here. I mean, I'm not so much turned on, for want of a better word, by the shiny new buildings. I like going to the old factories and the wastelands and the derelict bits because they're very inspirational. I mean, I think that's a thing that runs through many sort of creative people. I'm sure it does with you too.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially in a place like Manchester with the former stuff from the Industrial Revolution, and it's obviously a very industrial city, and we find that very inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's always, and I think the two sort of marry together really is the connection between the complete, as you was quite eloquently explaining, the countryside and the harshness, and you get the humility from just being, oh man, I am just a speck on this big planet, and you know, nature will always come through, and you know, it will always win through, and we're just a very just in cyclical terms of things. But equally, you find that inspiration, like you just said, then in the industrial stuff, because you think there's this urge to move forward all the time, and it's just good to think, wow, our forefathers and back, and you see the things that last, and there's a beauty in it that's, I don't know, like I say, as an artist, I've always found, you know, the derelict place is very inspirational, because I've always sort of thought that's humans walking and they built that wasn't, you know, and I think that's very kind of humbling as much as nature's humbling.
Very powerful, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, so, and obviously from an artist's point of view, I wanted to sort of, you know, as you saw, I incorporated into the poster we did for the Green Room gig. Tell me more about Andrew, who designed this sort of demo. I mean, is that someone you've known for a while, or is that someone that you just found online and collaborated with?
Well, no, he's my mum actually is his manager for his art back in Worcester, which is where I'm from and where we lived until 20. And he's a very close friend. He's in his own band, but he's been a professional artist for many a year now, and we were just very inspired by his stuff. It's like Si from Seething Demons has touched on about art inspiring music and music inspiring art. We found that we had a very close affinity between his work and our music. And as a result, it was very nice to, you know, have the two hand in hand. Yeah,
I love the, you know, the cross, the heart, and the cog at the top. Was that something? Again, I mean, I love talking about this because it's something, from my perspective, I do it with bands. Was that something that you go to him and say, "Hey, I've got a rough idea in place," or is it this is just the music and feel free to design what you want to do?
All the artwork we've used so far are pieces in their own right. That we've never had any, especially for our music. In fact, our logo is half of a piece of art that was placed in the very back of a book he worked with another friend of ours, and we've sort of just, you know, snipped that out from him essentially and put it for our piece, because it's interesting, like we were saying, that how art having different like purposes and different meanings, in that you can find many in one piece that wasn't originally designed to be that way. And we've sort of been able to use his art with its own intentions and use it for ours, and just find just such a perfect match for it.
We've magpied it a bit, really.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I loved about it, it's been something I've kind of flown the flag for a long time, is that, you know, I suppose yeah, Simon, you know more about this because we've been the same generation. But one of the first things I got into music was because of the artwork on album covers. I mean, I was a massive metal fan, and I was just drawn in by the artwork. It was so intricate, and then when you discover that that's actually been hand produced by a human, then when you fast forward to where we are now, and everything online is just computer art. And I love the fact that you went to someone who's actually hand drawn that. Whether I love some of his process, but it's not done on a machine. There's, you know, it's got wrinkles, it's got the imperfections, which I love about art, and that's why I was like, I loved you for that very reason, because that's something that I think has been lost in this churn of where we are in 2022.
Absolutely. I think
yeah, we were lucky with a certain ratio that our first album, the cover design was by Peter Christopherson, who works at Hypnosis, and he was one of the founder members of Throbbing Gristle, and it was one of the only projects he did like that. And I look back at that now and remember kind of pushing to have him, you know, be responsible for the art, and its history.
And again, when you again, we'll go back to you in a minute, Rex, when your thoughts are, but just while we're on that, so Simon, when you're doing when you're talking about what you just spoken about, was it the same sort of process? Did you go to him and say, look, this is a rough album title, this is what we wanted to sort of push the artwork, or were you just like, hey, this is what we're going to do, you feel free, we'll come back, yeah, and then, I mean, how did the process work for you?
Well, 40 years ago, which is quite difficult to remember, but I think there was an element of a suggestion of what we wanted, but he had a fairly free rein, you know, and that was the point of it, that, you know, if we wanted to control an artist, there was no real point in employing one. So You know, you've got to give free rein.
Yeah, I think that's where true greatness is built, where you know you collaborate and you have that, which is, like I say, it's been lost in this era, and I think it's something that's, you know, hopefully going forward that's going to become more, because I don't know your thoughts from your perspective, but I kind of seen one of the things I think has come out of COVID that I've seen has been a desire by people to have the real life experience rather than just having Zoom gigs or, you know, gigs on Facebook or gigs on whatever. Do you know, the actual that thing I think people are hungry for. And I've just seen it in a sort of general wider level. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but I think there's a kind of rising, or, you know, sort of a bubbling up of people wanting hand-produced stuff, whether it's just your local market that's selling, you know, someone who's made an embroidery or anything like that, which I personally see that, you know, starting to bubble up and rise. And I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think we're on the brink of a new era where that's going to be more craved towards in this machine age, or do you think that's just a little blips because after COVID?
No, I think I agree that it's a reaction to being, you know, not force-fed, but fed kind of mass-produced rubbish that people will and hopefully will realise that, you know, cottage industry and small-scale localised art is of much more value than you know, almost supermarket produce that you are offered. You know, and you don't have to look very, very hard or very far to find good things, because they do exist. It's just, you know, the channels that you have to go through to find it aren't always as obvious. You need to work a little bit, but it's definitely worth it.
I think that's very much the case with music as well, isn't it? That our hope is that, like we were saying about things being a bit more organic, that our music in itself is a bit less. We always try, especially with our recording and producing processes, and try and interfere with the actual music itself as little as possible. So for our demos and things, I play live through almost all of the tunes, because we never want to do one good bar and just repeat, because it loses that sort of human element, doesn't it, where it dips in and out of time.
Although big mistakes.
But but that gives it its soul and personality, doesn't it? Because otherwise you might as well just have written the bass line on the computer itself.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point I was sort of trying to sort of allude to, really, because, you know, we do live in a time where, you know, you can literally auto-generate the whole thing. You can literally, you know, just press and play, and, you know, and I think we've had that for, I mean, I personally feel that we've had sort of like 20 years of it, of this being every auto-tune, every perfection, and the human touch, because, I mean, as much as we at times want to believe it or not, we're still human beings. We're still the same as our great grandfathers. There's not much between us. I mean, that human touch. That's why I love listening to the blues. It's all the, like I say, stripped down organics. It's just a guy on the guitar sitting there singing about the pain of what it's like to work in the field all day or whatever, and that will never leave us as human beings, I think.
Music should be about people, and art as a whole should be about connections between people, and I feel like that connection's severed quite significantly when you don't have that, like we said, human element to it.
Exactly. I mean, on that sort of, I mean, I think, like, again, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, you just mentioned there, we were talking about how organic and being sort of real, for want of a better word. I think it's one of the optimisms I have as well, and I don't know, particularly Rex, if you've explored this, is it, I sort of see a general rising of decentralization, as in things are starting to be broken down. You know, the monetary system's being broken down, and things like blockchain and the idea of building up little areas and supporting local communities. I think it's a very exciting time as a musician to be in, that you're not reliant, and I'm sure your dad would, I'm sure he spent hours swearing his head up about what record companies are like and what the industry is like it was, because it was a horrible industry, and now the power's been switched back to the people who are creative, and you have got the ability to set your own platform up, and, you know, as we progress forward, you'll be able to literally make, you know, with NFTs and just general what you see with blockchain and all the top projects coming out of that, it will go more to the artist, which again, compared to, I'm sure, like I said, your dad's got some stories and nightmares of what it used to be like in the industry. That's another great thing, and it's just a case of tapping into that, and again, reaching out and touching humans and collaborating with humans, rather than just doing everything, you know, for want of a better word, just for the the bottom line of the dollar and the money.
It feels like very much that the creativity is back in the hands of the people more, as opposed to being like a conglomerate or people who sort of oversee it.
Yeah, I mean, Rex. I mean, obviously you're more of that generation. I mean, have you explored into things like the blockchain and what potential that will have for musicians of actually being completely in control and rather than being in hop to a massive label or these things are, like you said, it's not only organic. You can touch people all around the world, and they can directly support and fund you rather than going through a middleman. I mean, is that something I ask you because you're that generation. You're the future. Me and your dad we're entering our old age. It's you're the ones that are going to carry it all forward. I'll speak for myself here, brother.
It's not something I've particularly explored, but I do think it's a very interesting thing. I think on that though, it's somewhat of a double-edged sword in that. That obviously it's great to have your own freedom, but there are certainly things that I think we rely on other people for, like as much as it is great to have your own work in your complete hands, every now and then you do think, God, it would be great if somebody did our posters for us, or if in the days of when Dad was a musician, he said like essentially you were a musician. Pardon? when you were a musician, you were a musician, and that was it. As in, people did the driving for you, the promoting for you. Basically, you just had to put out your creativity, and I think that in itself is somewhat of a privilege. If there's pros and cons to each, I think.
No, I think you've hit a very wise kind of thread of thought there, Rex, because it has become. Maybe it's not. It's always been the same, and I'm sure. Simon, you better speak on it. You don't, when you're starting off a band, you are having to be, back in the day, making your own cassettes, making your own posters, going around, putting your fly posters on, doing the midnight run and bunging it on everywhere you could find. That was it, but you evolved to the point where people could help you. And I think you hit a very, very wise thread of thought there, because we can't do it all alone. And this is what I always say, like you just said, us creative people, whether artists or musicians, that's what we're good at. That's the thing that drives us on. I've got no idea about marketing or how to do this and do that. That is where we need people. But as I look at it, for everyone that's not, we're looking and go, oh, I wish I was a musician. There's the other person's like, they get turned on and they love doing marketing. They love doing all that stuff. And again, it's the key, what you just said, it's all about people. It's all about finding people, and that will never change.
Yeah, I think it'd be great in some sense to sort of have, as much as it is our music is absolutely of us and exclusively of us, every now and then you do think it'd be sort of great to have a team, if that makes sense, as in you meet people around you, like you said, who our passion is music, and whereas others is marketing, or we meet people like our friend Andy, who is an artist and his passion is, actually painting and stuff, and that's something that we give, and it benefits both of us. I think it's just sort of growing as an artist is meeting more people, more like-minded people who you can benefit each other in different ways.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe something I'm gonna go away and I'm gonna think about this a lot, because I think that's something, maybe a rich area and vein to explore about how we can support practically people like yourselves and people doing that, because I think that's maybe something we neglected. I'm going to go away and contemplate that, because I love what Stephen's doing with Butterfly Effect. I think that's one of the it's really exciting me with how he does look after people. He does really support them, and I love everything he does with that. It's expanding that, so we know the idea is there. It's just expanding these processes out and thinking of ways of doing that. And thank you for that, Rex. That's really, like I say, I'm going to spend the next few days and weeks contemplating how we can build that up, because it's something obviously it's needed, with musicians particularly.
Have a drink, please.
So the one really, I was going to sort of like, I'll be fascinated to know is to both of you, is there any sort of advice that you particularly, because you've been through it all, you've been, that we could maybe spend hours talking about your past history and stuff, but what's your advice that you turn to your son and say, hey, don't follow that path I went down, or hey, that's a good one, that's a good area to follow? What's your main advice to someone who's, like Rex?
Well, just as a kind of a musician, I can only really say, follow what you think is right. I'll give you a couple of, nudges when I think you're going the right way. But really, I think essentially it's up to you, and you've got to make your own kind of calls on it. Well, that's only me as a musician, because I don't know about marketing, I don't know about tickets or posters. I can only say, this is what I did when I was your age. And we were given a reasonable amount of rope to do what we wanted. And sometimes that worked very well, and other times not so well. But you learn, and you're young, and you will learn. And I would say just keep doing what you're doing if you think it's good, and let's see where we can go with that.
I think that's very wise words, and I mean, the one I would add on to that, and I think it's just generally, just enjoy this thing called life. I mean, it goes so quickly. I mean, that's one of the advice I always give to people. Like, before you know it, life just, exactly, life just passes by, and you're like, wow, where did that all go? So it really is. It's a bit of a cliche, but to enjoy every moment, and that's one of the things that I love about the Sealing Demons. They've always kept that in the forefront of their mind, maybe because of the history of the band and what where they came from with someone committed suicide. And I think that's always a good reminder of, like, hey, this is just a ride, just enjoy it. Don't take it. That's the old Bill Hicks line. You say, don't take yourself too seriously, man. It's all just a ride here. So I'm really looking forward to the the time's running up on this. So I'm really looking forward to the Stockton gig. And I love the venue itself. It's a kind of intimate kind of venue, and I think it promises to be a momentous night. From everything I'm sort of hearing around it, it's going to be a bit of a very special night. So I would say to anyone listening, jump on board, come along, and I'm sure, come along and say hello. We're all personable people. We're not all up our own asses and we sat there and just not, get the queue and that kind of stuff. So anything you really want to sort of say before we do wrap this up about the gig itself, where people can find you, where can people follow you on social network and all those kind of things?
Well, I've got to say that in terms of tickets, I'll leave that to Stephen Gill if I can.
Good man.
He's yet to explain that to me, I'm afraid, let alone me explain it. In terms of social media, it's Rex Simonson Music on Instagram to find us. And we have a Bandcamp page, which is where we upload all of our stuff, pretty much straight from producing to putting it out in a day or so. And that's just www.bandcamp.com/rexsimonson.com.
Perfect. And like I say, it's going to be a very special occasion. That especially hearing it's your sort of first live gig. That's going to be, because just from my memories when I was in a band, the very first gig is always memorable. Like a lot of things when you do for the first time, it's a very memorable experience, and it promises to be a memorable one, especially with the Sealing Demons, because nothing else. And I can say that they're one of them. Them live are one of the highlights. I love seeing them live. Those two, that band as a live experience are an immense, moment in your life. So together with you and them, it's going to be a very special occasion. Well, like I say, thank you very much for giving me your time, because I know that you're on your holidays in the south, there in France, where it's hot and sunny. So you don't know why you're sitting inside talking to someone like me. But so thank you very much for your time. And before we do wrap this up, I want to leave both of you. You can both of you have a final word.
Come and see us in Stockton. We'll see you
there. And you, Rex?
We'll try our best to play in time for you, but there's no promises.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to catching up at the Green Room. And I like to say, life is people.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, they say that life is people, and that people are angels, and that angels are devils, and the devils are me and you.